all the time. They have such a bad influence. Just a couple of days ago, Elon Musk decided to create his very own party in the United States, political party. And he said, the United States citizens are split into categories. I want to unify them. And guess what? Well, this is from yesterday. His artificial intelligence system has generated contents that are quite the opposite. Disgusting contents. Just contents that are pushing people one against the other. So the story goes on and on and on. Well, this is maybe a point when it comes to artificial intelligence that is not the most studied and underlined. But for me, it seems like it's the biggest danger, in fact. Because big tech companies are already very powerful. You see it. They replace, in some way, the states, in fact. With those systems, they can go even further. For me, it's maybe the major danger for the coming years. So on those very optimistic words, I would like to thank you a lot for listening to me. Hope we will be able to discuss a lot. I'm pretty glad to answer your questions, and let's keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Dr. Morit, you might have to take a seat for me. Thank you so much. Give him a round of applause. A little bird whispered to me that you might want to take notes and you might want to partake in this next session. That is the Q&A. If you don't understand anything he mentioned, you want more clarification, please do so as I invite Dr. Elizabeth Champon to moderate our questions and answers.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, with your permission, I'll stand on the established protocols. Thank you. And I will sit to keep him company. Thank you very much, Dr. Marcel, for your presentation. And if anything at all, I think we are quite now well aware of the risks that we face with AI. It has benefits, but it's very important to know the risks. So I will turn over to our guests, and please, audience, the modus is that we will take 2 or 3 questions at a time, and then Dr. Marcel will answer them. So if you just raise your hand, I'll identify our first 3. Yes. Just a second. I want 2 more, and then we can start. Okay. So you first. Can we have a mic for the questioners?
Thank you very much. Welcome to you again, Dr. Morit. In your presentation, you kept mentioning things like the algorithms that social media companies use and the way they are able to shape people's perceptions. Now, in my own little research that I've done on these things, a lot of people in the technical space have often advocated for the code of these algorithms to be made open source, which is available to the public to be able to view. So at the very least, if, let's say, your TikTok algorithm switches, you can take a look at it and see where the change suddenly happened. So what I wanted to ask, what is your opinion on keeping code open source to the public? Because some people advocate that it is the private property of the company running the code. So why should they make it open to the public? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm so excited about this topic. Honestly, I remember let me pay attention to my students. Well done. I'm proud of you. The auditorium is full up. Well done. Thank you. The upstairs is full up. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I've been thinking about artificial intelligence when I was a kid. I watched the movie of Class of 1984. The first time I saw robots in classrooms. Class of 1984. I'll give you the title later. I've been thinking about it. What has inspired me so much about this presentation is the risk involved in the use of artificial intelligence. And as an insurance person, I love this presentation and I'm interested and I want to take further. I want to find out whether there's any risk protection measures that the European Union has put in place to safeguard the use of images and our statements and everything being captured. I know right now I'm being captured by my students, and very soon I'll be online as an artificial intelligence person. So please, if you could address the risk element and how the European Union is addressing that with way of regulation protection, I'll be glad. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc, for the presentation. You spoke about the EU Convention on AI, and you took issue with that convention in respect of lack of precision, and you seem to suggest that it leaves a lot of room for regulation. And my question is, don't you think that the approach adopted by the EU was as a result of first finding the territory of AI, the scope of it, and also allowing state parties to the convention to have some margin of appreciation or based on cultural relativity to be able to determine the scope of some of the AI rules. For instance, in relation to human rights, we have freedom of expression, which is quite vague, and it is vague because state parties are given some liberty to determine what amount to that freedom of expression. So don't you think it is the same thing with the EU law? And my second question is, what approach will you suggest that the EU as an organization or Africa as a continent should adapt in addressing issues regarding AI?
Thank you. So we'll start with the open source.
Thank you so much for your questions. Yes, let's go back to the first one about open source and, for instance, TikTok algorithm. In Europe, there has been a very strong regulation in 2022 named the Digital Services Act. And this has not made available the source code, but more, let's say, it obliges companies to explain how the system works. Because I agree that open source can be interesting, but for the general public, there's no use to have the algorithm in front of their eyes because they will not be able to read it, basically. So what is important, I would say, is that the companies can explain how it works. And what is also very important is that the companies can be obliged to make it possible for customers to switch off the algorithm that will suggest contents, specific profiled contents, meaning that we will have access to everything. But let's be honest, the problem is that the customers are addicted to such services. And if, for instance, you as a customer of TikTok say, okay, I switch off the algorithm, I will see any kind of content. This is boring. A couple of minutes later, you will go back to personalized content. You know, TikTok is like crack. Short content, very personalized, very addictive, gives you a shoot of endorphin, you're happy, you need more. It's short, it's strong, you need more. It's crack. It's digital crack. The question is, in fact, how can we avoid that? I mean, I hate that. Being in the metro, for instance, and watching people, they're on their phones for minutes and minutes and hours every day. How can you avoid that? Have no real answer. I think now we should at school teach how this can be dangerous, in fact, basically, and can be against self-determination. So yes, to go back to your question, open source is great, but for the general public, we need more than just open source. Then the use of images. Well, in fact, as often you have several regulations that can apply. And in Europe, you have, for instance, personal data protection, as I said before, which is very strong, and images are personal data, basically. So they are protected under GDPR. Then you have the right to privacy, which can sometimes also apply. Then you have an image right, which is a patrimonial right on your image. So you have 3 rights, in fact, that can protect you from your image being used. That's a lot, basically. Then you have, under some national regulations, for instance, French regulation now, things that protect you, for instance, from deepfakes. It's very interesting. Using your image to create a deepfake is, under French law, something that is punished. And very severely punished if it's a sexual deepfake, because we have many cases of that. So, yes, definitely the use of images of a person is under French law and European countries' law very, very protected. Hope that answers your question.
Actually, it's about the risk-based approach. So we all agree that there's high risk when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence. I want to find out whether that risk has been calculated and how we as insurance people can fit into by way of taking advantage of a product of AI risk. Thank you.
Yeah. That's a tough question. In fact, I have no real answer about that. I think the market is maybe a bit too young for that. I'm pretty sure there's a huge market in the coming years. You may be an insurance specialist. You know that in the field of insurance, you have to measure risk very, very well. And when it comes, for instance, to data protection, because we have more, let's say, experience regarding data protection, we all know that a risk, this is 2 things. It's like a hole. It's deep and it's broad. How deep is it? How broad is it, basically? In the field of artificial intelligence today, it's very difficult to answer the question. Because I mentioned high risk because the fines can be so high. But will they really be applied? At what extent? I don't know. If you take the example of GDPR fines can be up to 4% of the general turnover of a company, which is very close, in fact, to the risk in the field of artificial intelligence. It's the same basis, because it has been drafted by the same authority, the European Union, European Commission and Parliament. But if I look back to the last, let's say, decade in the field of data protection law, a little bit less than a decade, the 4% is the maximum that has almost never been reached. So, in fact, today it's very hard to quantify the risk. That's a very interesting question, and we could talk about during hours, because one of my PhD candidates who finished a thesis last year, this was the topic of the thesis, risk analysis in IT law. So, of course, now he's a lot questioning himself about risk analysis in the field of artificial intelligence, because this is a huge market. Then again, the last question was about Artificial Intelligence Act, and also, I guess, the Council of Europe regulation and the lack of precision. Well, in fact, I think we should see those two regulations in a different way. The Council of Europe has always drafted things first that are very imprecise. Again, let me tell you about data protection. The first regulations, so to say, that have been drafted by the Council of Europe in that field date back to the 70s. That's very, very early. At that time, it was just like 20 lines, you know, more or less nothing. Then came a convention, 81, etc., etc. I find it, to be honest, a good approach, because technologies are evolving so fast that I think it's a good approach to start with something that is broad and then become more and more precise when time goes by. I think that sounds. European Union, with the AI Act, did try to do the reverse. Immediately a regulation with more than 100 articles, massive, in order to say to the world, this is the regulation for artificial intelligence. And I must say, I'm not convinced, because it's maybe too early, and I don't think 100% it is the right approach. But then again, of course, the European Union has other tools. We will have directive, for instance. We will have, of course, also guidelines. For GDPR was the same thing, we have guidelines a lot. And this will help us to understand better the regulation. So, yeah, again, I think we will have to wait a little bit. One thing I didn't tell you is that the Artificial Intelligence Act has been voted last year, but it will enter into force next year, 2026. So again, it's something that will take a little time, of course. Yes, absolutely. And there was a question about what approach suggests. Well, in fact, for Africa, I'm not a politician, I'm not the parliament. The thing is that I would say that the approach is, as said before, mostly a business-based approach. The European Union has a business-based approach. And as I said a couple of seconds ago, I'm not so sure that this is the most important approach at short term. I would first and foremost go for legislation that helps us keep our human rights, our pluralism, our democracy alive. For me, this is maybe because I'm a lawyer specialized in public law, I will say this is the most important thing to do. If you don't do that, I say you, but in fact it's the world I'm talking to, same thing in Europe. If we don't do that, the risk is that at the end of the day, there will be no state, there will be no social contract to save, and this is for me the major risk. So the business approach should come maybe second, but we should keep in mind the risk for democracy. And this is why the Council of Europe approach is so, I would say, smart. It's the right one, I would say. It's a very important approach. The problem is that, as I said before, it's such a broad approach. So we need to turn that into legislation. And then with regard to business and companies, I don't think, as I said, that the Artificial Intelligence Act has the right approach because it's based on the preconception that one system involves one kind of risk. And as I said, I'm not sure it's a good approach. Maybe a human-centric approach would be better. What are the risks for humans? What are the risks for consumers? Exactly the approach we have with data protection. Because with data protection, The question we should raise is, what is the risk for you as a citizen, as a consumer, as a person? And this is not the case for Artificial Intelligence Act. As I said, chatbots, for instance. I mean, are chatbots limited risk AI? Again, I'm not sure. Depends how you use them. If it's for consumer service, because you have a problem with your fridge, okay. If it's something you use on a daily basis to ask questions like, for who should I vote? Is there limited risk? No, definitely not.
Thank you. We'll take a second set. Maybe not have too many at a time, maybe one or two.
Yes, please. Thank you for the opportunity, Professor Moritz. Please, my question would be on the last segment that was about Elon Musk and the outrage that happened online because of the controversial comments about Hitler. So please, my question is that a lot of people place the blame on the AI itself. But don't you think generative AI and other forms of AI are actually a reflection of the data that it collects? So those comments and those things that it was saying would rather be a reflection of the demographic that it picks information from. And don't you think that similar instances or similar occasions would happen in the future with the current developments of AI? Thank you.
Can you just repeat the final part of your, yes.
Okay, and I'll say, don't you think that such instances would be likely to occur in the future with the current development of generative AI at the pace that it's going?
Okay, I got it. Yes, in fact, you're right. Well, first, will this be on TV? Because I have to go to New York this summer with my family. I'm not pretty sure I have the right to say a lot of things, but let's give it a try. If I don't go to New York this summer, it's your fault, definitely. If I'm stuck in Canada, it will be your fault. No, just kidding. What you say about Elon Musk is interesting. Yeah, definitely. Yes, I would say artificial intelligence, generative AI can be a reflection of the mindset of the population. Yes, but the problem is, first, you can manipulate it. Of course. I mean, a lot of people said Elon Musk helped Trump being elected because he gave like 200 million, something like that. I don't think this is the major donation he made. I mean, he has the algorithm of X. Maybe this is a major donation, right? Because it can help, of course, pushing forward some kind of contents. Then it's a reflection of what people think, and one problem is that exactly because of artificial intelligence and filter bubbles and so on, people tend no longer to think freely. And this is a major issue. Comes with those famous filter bubbles. If you like the topic, you can read the Eli Pariser book, 2011. Fantastic book. I mean, that's 14 years ago. It says everything. With these algorithmic gatekeepers that will prevent you from accessing to some kind of data. But also because it can lead to what is called, from a sociological point of view, echo chambers. Meaning, if you think something, being surrounded by the same kind of content will lead you to think it louder. And louder, and louder, and louder. And this is very, very dangerous. And this is exactly what we have with generative AI. There has been a study a couple of weeks ago in France, I don't have the reference now, but it's very interesting. It says that generative AI is able, for instance, to know which political party you belong to and to adapt the results just after, in average, 2 questions, even if those questions are absolutely not political ones. Like, for instance, easy example, what's the best golf around, let's say, Kumasi? If I ask that question to ChatGPT, this might lead ChatGPT to think that I belong to some political mind and not to some other, because I play golf, basically. And that the majority of people who play golf will have a political thinking. No? So this is really, really, really dangerous. It's not the reflection of what people think. It changes the way people think.
I have someone who sent me a question. People have access to me, so I'll read the question. Why should we be concerned about risk when we know that behind AI success is big data? And big data is a commodity in the eyes of the European Union. So do you not agree that addressing the risk as identified will lead to limiting the generation of big data, and for that matter, limiting AI? What do you think?
Yeah, again, important question. Of course, I think the European Union, again, I'm not a politician, but I think they are now aware that they are stuck because they have focused so much on data protection that now they have a problem of AI. Because it's simply, as I said, not totally compatible. Big data has been sold, I would say that, sold to citizens in Europe, saying this will help better public services. This will do a lot of good. This will help businesses. And this is exactly what has been told to people for now a decade. Because it's, a decade we are talking about big data in Europe. And never, ever, the word artificial intelligence has been pronounced during this decade. And maybe this is something that is reveals that they are ill at ease in Europe because they would like more big data, but at the same time they know that people are not so keen on developing artificial intelligence with those data. Now I think we have no choice. If you want to succeed in artificial intelligence, we need more data, definitely. We need to have it sovereign, to have our own data. And sovereignty is really a very important word, because otherwise the risk is that we will use artificial intelligence systems that are not yours, meaning Chinese, American, and it's the same thing in Africa. I mean, if you use a US or a Chinese or a French AI, it's not yours. So there will be biases, there will be things that